Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., born November 20th, 1942, is an American politician who served as the 47th Vice President of the United States from 2009 to 2017. Biden also represented Delaware in the U.S. Senate from 1973 to 2009. A member of the Democratic Party, Biden is a candidate for president in the 2020 election. Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and lived there for 10 years before moving with his family to Delaware. He became a lawyer in 1969 and was elected to the Newcastle County Council in 1970. He was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 1972, when he became the sixth youngest senator in American history. Biden was re-elected 6 times and was the 4th most senior senator when he resigned to assume the vice presidency in 2009. Biden was a long-time member and former chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. He opposed the Gulf War in 1991, but advocated US and NATO intervention in the Bosnian War in 1994 and 1995. He voted in favor of the resolution authorizing the Iraq War in 2002, but opposed the surge of US troops in 2007. He has also served as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, dealing with issues relating to drug policy, crime prevention, and civil liberties. Biden led the efforts to pass the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act and the Violence Against Women Act. He also chaired the Judiciary Committee during the contentious U.S. Supreme Court nominations of Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. Biden unsuccessfully sought the Democratic presidential nomination in 1988 and in 2008. In 2008, Biden was the running mate of Democratic presidential nominee Barack Obama. As vice president, Biden oversaw infrastructure spending aimed at counteracting the Great Recession and helped formulate U.S. policy toward Iraq through the withdrawal of U.S. troops in 2011. His ability to negotiate with congressional Republicans helped the Obama administration pass legislation such as the Tax Relief, Unemployment Insurance Reauthorization, and Job Creation Act of 2010, which resolved a taxation deadlock, the Budget Control Act of 2011, which resolved that year's debt ceiling crisis, and the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012, which addressed the impending fiscal cliff. Obama and Biden were re-elected in 2012. In October 2015, after months of speculation, Biden announced he would not seek the presidency in the 2016 elections. In January 2017, Obama awarded Biden the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction. After completing his second term as vice president, Biden joined the faculty of the University of Pennsylvania, where he was named the Benjamin Franklin Professor of Presidential Practice. He announced his 2020 run for president on April 25, 2019. Biden was born on November 20th, 1942, at St. Mary's Hospital in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to Catherine Eugenia Biden and Joseph Robinette Biden Sr. He was the first of 4 siblings in a Catholic family, with a sister and 2 brothers. His mother was of Irish descent, with roots variously attributed to County Louth or County Londonderry. His paternal grandparents, Mary Elizabeth Robinette and Joseph H. Biden, an oil businessman from Baltimore, Maryland, were of English, French, and Irish ancestry. His paternal third great-grandfather, William Biden, was born in Sussex, England, and immigrated to the United States. His maternal great-grandfather, Edward Francis Blewett, was a member of the Pennsylvania State Senate. Biden's father had been wealthy early in his life, but suffered several financial setbacks by the time his son was born. For several years, the family had to live with Biden's maternal grandparents, the Finnegans. When the Scranton area fell into economic decline during the 1950s, Biden's father could not find sustained work. In 1953, the Biden family moved into an apartment in Claymont, Delaware, where they lived for several years before again moving to a house in Wilmington, Delaware. Joe Biden Sr. became a successful used car salesman, and the family's circumstances were middle class. Biden attended the Archmere Academy in Claymont, where he was a standout halfback wide receiver on the high school football team. He helped lead a perennially losing team to an undefeated season in his senior year. He played on the baseball team as well. During these years, he participated in an anti-segregation sit-in at a Wilmington theater. Academically, he was an above-average student, was considered a natural leader among the students, and was elected class president during his junior and senior years. He graduated in 1961. He earned his bachelor's in 1965 from the University of Delaware with a double major in history and political science, graduating with a class rank of 506 out of 688. His classmates were impressed by his cramming abilities, and he played halfback with the Blue Hens freshman football team. In 1964, while on spring break in the Bahamas, he met and began dating Nelia Hunter, who was from an affluent background in Skaneateles, New York, and attended Syracuse University. He told her that he aimed to become a senator by the age of 30 and then president. He dropped a junior year plan to play for the varsity football team as a defensive back, enabling him to spend more time visiting out of state with her. He then entered Syracuse University of Law, receiving a half scholarship based on a financial need with some additional assistance based on academics. By his own description, he found law school to be the biggest bore in the world and pulled many all-nighters to get by. During his first year there, he was accused of having plagiarized 5 of 15 pages of a law review article. Biden said it was inadvertent due to his not knowing the proper rules of citation, and he was permitted to retake the course after receiving an F grade, which was subsequently dropped from his record. This incident would later attract attention when further plagiarism accusations emerged in 1987. He received his Juris Doctor in 1968, graduating 76th of 85 in his class. Biden was admitted to the Delaware Bar in 1969. Biden received student draft deferments during this period, at the peak of the Vietnam War, and in 1968 he was reclassified by the Selective Service System as not available for service due to having had asthma as a teenager. He never took part in anti-war demonstrations, later saying that at the time he was preoccupied with marriage and law school and wore sports coats, not tie-dyed. Negative impressions of drinking alcohol in the Biden and Finnegan families and in the neighborhood led to Biden becoming a teetotaler. He suffered from stuttering through much of his childhood and into his 20s, and says he overcame it by spending many hours reciting poetry in front of a mirror. On August 27, 1966, while Biden was still a law student, he married Nelia Hunter. They overcame her parents' initial reluctance for her to wed a Roman Catholic, and the ceremony was held in a Catholic church in Skaneateles. They had 3 children, Joseph R. Beau Biden III in 1969, Robert Hunter in 1970, and Naomi Christina in 1971. During 1968, Biden clerked for 6 months at a Wilmington law firm headed by prominent local Republican William Prickett, and, as he later said, thought of myself as a Republican. He disliked the conservative racial politics of the incumbent Democrat governor of Delaware, Charles L. Terry, and supported a more liberal Republican, Russell W. Peterson, who defeated Terry in 1968. The local Republicans tried to recruit him, but he resisted due to his distaste for Republican presidential candidate Richard Nixon, and registered as an independent instead. In 1969, Biden resumed practicing law in Wilmington, first as a public defender and then at a firm headed by Sid Balick, a local active Democrat. Balick named him to the Democratic Forum, a group trying to reform and revitalize the state party, and Biden switched his registration to Democrat. He also started his own firm, Biden and Walsh. Corporate law, however, did not appeal to him, and criminal law did not pay well. He supplemented his income by managing properties. Later, in 1969, Biden ran as a Democrat for the Newcastle County Council on a liberal platform that included support for public housing in the suburban area. He won by a solid 2,000-vote margin in the usually Republican district, and in a bad year for Democrats in the state. Even before taking his seat, he was already talking about running for the U.S. Senate in a couple of years. He served on the county council from 1970 to 1972, while continuing his private law practice. Biden represented the 4th District on the county council. Among issues he addressed on the council was his opposition to large highway projects that might disrupt Wilmington neighborhoods, including those related to Interstate 95. Biden's entry into the 1972 U.S. Senate election in Delaware presented a unique circumstance. Longtime Delaware political figure and Republican incumbent, Senator J. Caleb Boggs, was considering retirement, which would likely have left U.S. Representative Pete DuPont and Wilmington Mayor Harry G. Haskell, Jr. in a divisive primary fight. To avoid that, U.S. President Richard Nixon helped convince Boggs to run again with full party support. No other Democrat wanted to run against Boggs. Biden's campaign had virtually no money and was given no chance of winning. It was managed by his sister, Valerie Biden Owens, who would go on to manage his future campaigns, and staffed by other family members, and relied upon handed-out newsprint position papers and meeting voters face-to-face. The small size of the state and lack of a major media market made the approach feasible. He did receive some assistance from the AFL-CIO and Democratic pollster Patrick Cadle. His campaign issues focused on withdrawal from Vietnam, the environment, civil rights, mass transit, more equitable taxation, healthcare, the public's dissatisfaction with politics as usual, and change. During the summer, he trailed by almost 30 percentage points, but his energy levels, his attractive young family, and his ability to connect with voters' emotions gave the surging Biden an advantage over the ready-to-retire Boggs. He won the November 7, 1972 election in an upset by a margin of 3,162 votes. On December 18, 1972, a few weeks after the election, Biden's wife and 1-year-old daughter Naomi were killed in an automobile accident while Christmas shopping in Hockessin, Delaware. Nelia Biden's station wagon was hit by a tractor-trailer as she pulled out from an intersection. The truck driver was cleared of any wrongdoing. Biden's sons, Beau and Hunter, survived the accident and were taken to the hospital in fair condition. Beau with a broken leg and other wounds, and Hunter with a minor skull fracture and other head injuries. Doctors soon said both would make full recoveries. Biden considered resigning to care for them, but was persuaded not to by Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield. Subsequent to the accident, Biden commented that the truck driver had been drinking alcohol before the collision, but these allegations were denied by the driver's family and were never substantiated by the police. Biden was sworn into office on January 5, 1973, by Francis R. Valeo, the Secretary of the Senate, in a small chapel at the Delaware Division of the Wilmington Medical Center. Beau was wheeled in with his leg still in traction. Hunter, who had already been released, was also there, as were other members of the extended family. Witnesses and television cameras were also present, and the event received national attention. At age 30, the minimum age required to hold the office, Biden became the 6th youngest senator in U.S. history and one of only 18 senators who took office before reaching the age of 31. But the accident left him filled with both anger and religious doubt. "I like to walk around seedy neighborhoods at night when I thought there was a better chance of finding a fight. I had not known I was capable of such rage. I felt God had played a horrible trick on me." To be at home every day for his young sons, Biden began the practice of commuting every day by Amtrak train for 90 minutes each way from his home in the Wilmington suburbs to Washington, D.C., which he continued to do throughout his Senate career. In the aftermath of the accident, he had trouble focusing on work and appeared to just go through the motions of being a senator. In his memoirs, Biden notes that staffers were taking bets on how long he would last. A single father for 5 years, he left standing orders that he be interrupted at the Senate at any time if his sons called. In remembrance of his wife and daughter, Biden does not work on December the 18th, the anniversary of the accident. Biden's elder son, Beau, became Delaware Attorney General and an Army judge advocate who served in Iraq. His younger son, Hunter, became a Washington attorney and lobbyist. On May 30th, 2015, Beau died at the age of 46 after a 2-year battle with brain cancer. At the time of his death, Beau had widely been seen as the front-runner to be the Democratic nominee for governor of Delaware in 2016. In 1975, Biden met Jill Tracy Jacobs, who grew up in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, and would become a teacher in Delaware. They met on a blind date arranged by Biden's brother, although it turned out that Biden had already noticed a photograph of her in an advertisement for a local park in Wilmington, Delaware. Biden would credit her with renewing his interest in both politics and life. On June 17, 1977, Biden and Jacobs were married by a Catholic priest at the chapel at the United Nations in New York. Jill Biden has a bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware, 2 master's degrees, one from Westchester University and the other from Villanova University, and a doctorate in education from the University of Delaware. They have one daughter together, Ashley Blazer, born 1981, who became a social worker and staffer at the Delaware Department of Services for Children, Youth and their Families. Biden and his wife are Roman Catholics and regularly attend Mass at St. Joseph's on the Brandywine in Greenville, Delaware. During his first years in the Senate, Biden focused on legislation regarding consumer protection and environmental issues and called for greater accountability on the part of government. In mid-1974, freshman Senator Biden was named one of the 200 Faces for the Future by Time magazine, in a profile that mentioned what had happened to his family and characterized Biden as self-confident and compulsively ambitious. In 1974, Biden was one of the Senate's leading opponents of desegregation busing, a then frequently court-ordered practice of racially integrating schools. Biden said that he supported the aim of school desegregation, but not the practice of busing, which his white constituents bitterly opposed. Such opposition would later lead his party to mostly abandon school desegregation policies. Biden became ranking minority member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary in 1981. In 1984, he was Democratic floor manager for the successful passage of the Comprehensive Crime Control Act. Over time, the tough-on-crime provisions of the legislation became controversial on the left and among criminal justice reform proponents. And in 2019, Biden characterized his role in passing the legislation as a big mistake. Biden and his supporters praised him for modifying some of the Act's worst provisions, and it was his most important legislative accomplishment at that point in time. He first considered running for president in that year, after he gained notice for giving speeches to party audiences that simultaneously scolded and encouraged Democrats. Regarding foreign policy, during his first decade in the Senate, Biden focused on arms control issues. In response to the refusal of the US Congress to ratify the SALT II treaty signed in 1979 by Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev and President Jimmy Carter, he took the initiative to meet the Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko, educated him about American concerns and interests, and secured several changes to address objections of the Foreign Relations Committee. When the Reagan administration wanted to interpret the 1972 SALT I treaty loosely in order to allow the Strategic Defense Initiative to proceed, Biden argued for strict adherence to the treaty's terms. He clashed again with the Reagan administration in 1986 over economic sanctions against South Africa. He received considerable attention when he excoriated Secretary of State George P. Shultz at a Senate hearing because of the administration's support of that country, which continued to practice the apartheid system. Biden ran for the 1988 Democratic presidential nomination, formally declaring his candidacy at the Wilmington train station on June 9, 1987. He was attempting to become the youngest president since John F. Kennedy. When the campaign began, he was considered a potentially strong candidate because of his moderate image, his speaking ability on the stump, his appeal to baby boomers, his high-profile position as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee at the upcoming Robert Bork Supreme Court nomination hearings, and his fundraising appeal. He raised $1.7 million in the first quarter of 1987, more than any other candidate. By August 1987, Biden's campaign, whose messaging was confused due to staff rivalries, had begun to lag behind those of Michael Dukakis and Dick Gephardt, though he had still raised more funds than all candidates but Dukakis, and was seeing an upturn in Iowa polls. In September 1987, the campaign ran into trouble when he was accused of plagiarising a speech that had been made earlier that year by Neil Kinnock, leader of the British Labour Party. Kinnock's speech included the lines, "Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university?" Then, pointing to his wife in the audience, "Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Was it because all our predecessors were thick?" While Biden's speech included the lines, "I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to university?" Then, pointing to his wife in the audience, "Why is it that my wife, who is sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college? Is it because our fathers and mothers were not bright? Is it because I'm the first Biden in 1,000 generations to get a college and graduate degree that I was smarter than the rest?" Biden had in fact cited Kinnock as the source of the formulation on previous occasions, but he made no reference to the original source at the August 23rd Democratic debate at the Iowa State Fair being reported on, nor in an August the 26th interview for the National Education Association. Moreover, while political speeches often appropriate ideas and language from each other, Biden's use came under more scrutiny because he fabricated aspects of his own family's background in order to match Kinnock's. Biden was soon found to have earlier that year lifted passages from a 1967 speech by Robert F. Kennedy, for which his aides took the blame, and a short phrase from the 1961 inaugural address of John F. Kennedy, and in 2 prior years to have done the same with a 1976 passage from Hubert H. Humphrey. A few days later, Biden's plagiarism incident in law school came to public light. Video was also released showing that when earlier questioned by a New Hampshire resident about his grades in law school, he had stated that he had graduated in the top half of his class, that he had attended law school on a full scholarship, and that he had received 3 degrees in college, each of which was untrue, or exaggerations of his actual record. Advisors and reporters pointed out that he falsely claimed to have marched in the civil rights movement. The Kinnock and school revelations were magnified by the limited amount of other news about the nomination race at the time. when most of the public were not yet paying attention to any of the campaigns. Biden thus fell into what the Washington Post writer Paul Taylor described as that year's trend, a trial-by-media ordeal. He lacked a strong demographic or political group of support to help him survive the crisis. He withdrew from the nomination race on September 23, 1987, saying his candidacy had been overrun by the exaggerated shadow of his past mistakes. After Biden withdrew from the race, it was revealed that the Dukakis campaign had secretly made a video highlighting the Biden-Kinnock comparison and distributed it to news outlets. Later, in 1987, the Delaware Supreme Court's Board of Professional Responsibility cleared Biden of the law school plagiarism charges regarding his standing as a lawyer, saying Biden had not violated any rules. In February 1988, after suffering from several episodes of increasingly severe neck pain, Biden was taken by long-distance ambulance to Walter Reed Army Medical Center and given life-saving surgery to correct an intracranial berry aneurysm that had begun leaking. The situation was serious enough that a priest had administered last rites at the hospital. While recuperating, he suffered a pulmonary embolism, which represented a major complication. Another operation to repair a second aneurysm, which had caused no symptoms but was also at risk from bursting, was performed in May 1988. The hospitalization and recovery kept Biden from his duties in the US Senate for 7 months. Biden has had no recurrences or effects from the aneurysm since then. In retrospect, Biden's family came to believe that the early end to his presidential campaign had been a blessing in disguise. For had he still been campaigning in the midst of the primaries in early 1988, he might well have not have stopped to seek medical attention, and the condition might have become unsurvivable. Biden was a long-time member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary. He chaired it from 1987 until 1995, and he served as ranking minority member on it from 1981 until 1987, and again from 1995 until 1997. While chairman, Biden presided over 2 of the most contentious U.S. Supreme Court confirmation hearings in history, those for Robert Bork in 1987 and Clarence Thomas in 1991. In the Bork hearings, he stated his opposition to Bork soon after the nomination, reversing an approval in an interview of a hypothetical Bork nomination he had made the previous year, and angering conservatives who thought he could not conduct the hearings dispassionately. At the close, he won praise for conducting the proceedings fairly and with good humor and courage, as his 1988 presidential campaign collapsed in the middle of the hearings. Rejecting some of the less intellectually honest arguments that other Bork opponents were making, Biden framed his discussion around the belief that the U.S. Constitution provides rights to liberty and privacy that extend beyond those explicitly enumerated in the text, and that Bork's strong originalism was ideologically incompatible with that view. Bork's nomination was rejected in the committee by a 9-5 vote, and then rejected in the full Senate by a 58-42 margin. Biden was a long-time member of the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. In 1997, he became the ranking minority member and chaired the committee in January 2001, and from June 2001 through 2003. When Democrats retook control of the Senate following the 2006 elections, Biden again assumed the top spot on the committee in 2007. Biden was generally a liberal internationalist in foreign policy. He collaborated effectively with important Republican Senate figures such as Richard Lugar and Jesse Helms, and sometimes went against elements of his own party. Biden was also co-chairman of the NATO Observer Group in the Senate. A partial list covering this time showed Biden meeting with some of the 150 leaders from nearly 60 countries and international organizations. Biden held frequent hearings as chairman of the committee, as well as holding many subcommittee hearings during the 3 times he chaired the Subcommittee on European Affairs. Biden was a familiar figure to his Delaware constituency by virtue of his daily train commuting from there, and generally sought to attend to state needs. Biden was a strong supporter of increased Amtrak funding and rail security. He hosted barbecues and an annual Christmas dinner for the Amtrak crews, and they would sometimes hold the last train of the night a few minutes so he could catch it. He earned the nickname Amtrak Joe as a result, and in 2011, Amtrak's Wilmington station was named the Joseph R. Biden Jr. Railroad Station in honor of the over 7,000 trips he made from there. He was an advocate for Delaware military installations, including Dover Air Force Base and Newcastle Air National Guard Base. Following his initial election in 1972, Biden was re-elected to 6 additional terms in the elections of 1978, 1984, 1990, 1996, 2002 and 2008, usually getting about 60% of the vote. He did not face strong opposition. Pete DuPont, then governor, chose not to run against him in 1984. Biden spent 28 years as a junior senator due to the 2-year seniority of his Republican colleague William V. Roth Jr. After Roth was defeated for re-election by Tom Carper in 2000, Biden became Delaware's senior senator. He then became the longest-serving senator in Delaware history and, as of 2018, was the 18th longest-serving senator in the history of the United States. In May 1999, Biden became the youngest senator to cast 10,000 votes. Biden had thought about running for president again ever since his failed 1988 bid. Biden declared his candidacy for president on January 31, 2007, after having discussed running for months prior. Biden made a formal announcement to Tim Russett on Meet the Press, stating he would be the best Biden I can be. In January 2006, Delaware newspaper columnist Harry F. Themmel wrote that Biden occupies the sensible center of the Democratic Party. Themmel concludes that this is the position Biden desires, and that in a campaign he plans to stress the dangers to the security of the average American, not just from the terrorist threat, but from the lack of health assistance, crime, and energy dependence on unstable parts of the world. Overall, Biden had difficulty raising funds, struggled to draw people to his rallies, and failed to gain traction against the high-profile candidacies of Obama and Senator Hillary Clinton. He never rose above single digits in the national polls of the Democratic candidates. In the initial contest on January 3, 2008, Biden placed 5th in the Iowa caucuses, garnering slightly less than 1% of the state delegates. Biden withdrew from the race that evening, saying, "There is nothing sad about tonight. I feel no regret." Despite the lack of success, Biden's stature in the political world rose as a result of his 2008 campaign. In particular, it changed the relationship between Biden and Obama. Although the two had served together on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, they had not been close, with Biden having resented Obama's quick rise to political stardom, and Obama having viewed Biden as garrulous and patronizing. Now, having gotten to know each other during 2007, Obama appreciated Biden's campaigning style and appeal to working-class voters, and Biden was convinced that Obama was the real deal. Since shortly following Biden's withdrawal from the presidential race, Obama had been privately telling Biden that he was interested in finding an important place for him in a possible Obama administration. Biden declined Obama's first request to vet him for the vice presidential slot, fearing the vice presidency would represent a loss in status and voice from his Senate position, but subsequently changed his mind. In a June 22, 2008 interview on NBC's Meet the Press, Biden confirmed that although he was not actively seeking a spot on the ticket, he would accept the vice presidential nomination if offered. In early August, Obama and Biden met in secret to discuss a possible vice presidential relationship, and the two developed a strong personal rapport. On August 22, 2008, Barack Obama announced that Biden would be his running mate. The New York Times reported that the strategy behind the choice reflected a desire to fill out the ticket with someone who had foreign policy and national security experience, and not to help the ticket win a swing state or to emphasize Obama's change message. Other observers pointed out Biden's appeal to middle-class and blue-collar voters, as well as his willingness to aggressively challenge Republican nominee John McCain in a way that Obama seemed uncomfortable doing at times. In accepting Obama's offer, Biden ruled out to him the possibility of running for president again in 2016, although comments by Biden in subsequent years seemed to back off that stance, with Biden not wanting to diminish his political power by appearing uninterested in advancement. Biden was officially nominated for vice president on August 27th by voice vote at the 2008 Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado. After his selection as a vice presidential candidate, Biden was criticized by his own Roman Catholic Diocese of Wilmington, Bishop Michael Saltarelli, for not opposing abortion. The diocese confirmed that even if elected vice president, Biden would not be allowed to speak at Catholic schools. Biden was soon barred from receiving Holy Communion by the bishop of his original hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, because of his support for abortion rights. However, Biden did continue to receive communion at his local Delaware parish. Scranton became a flashpoint in the competition for swing state Catholic voters between the Democratic campaign and liberal Catholic groups, who stressed that other social issues should be considered as much or more than abortion, and many bishops and conservative Catholics who maintained abortion was paramount. Biden said he believed that life began at conception, but that he would not impose his personal religious views on others. Bishop Saltarelli had previously stated regarding stances similar to Biden's, "No one today would accept this statement from any public servant. I am personally opposed to human slavery and racism, but will not impose my personal conviction in the legislative area. Likewise, none of us should accept this statement from any public servant. I am personally opposed to abortion, but will not impose my personal conviction in the legislative area." On November 4, 2008, Biden was elected Vice President of the United States as Obama's running mate. Soon after the election, he was appointed chairman of President-elect Obama's transition team. During the transition phase of the Obama administration, Biden said he was in daily meetings with Obama and that McCain was still his friend. The U.S. Secret Service codename given to Biden is Celtic, referencing his Irish roots. In October 2010, Biden stated that Obama had asked him to remain as his running mate for the 2012 presidential election. With Obama's popularity on the decline, however, in late 2011, White House Chief of Staff William M. Daley conducted some secret polling and focus group research into the idea of Secretary of State Clinton replacing Biden on the ticket. The notion was dropped when the results showed no appreciable improvement for Obama, and White House officials later said that Obama had never entertained the idea. Biden's May 2012 statement that he was absolutely comfortable with same-sex marriage gained considerable public attention in comparison to President Obama's position, which had been described as evolving. Biden made his statement without administration consent, and Obama and his aides were quite irked, since Obama had planned to shift positions several months later, in the build-up to the party convention, and since Biden had previously counseled the president to avoid the issue lest key Catholic voters be offended. Gay rights advocates seized upon the Biden stance, and within days Obama announced that he too supported same-sex marriage, an action in part forced by Biden's unexpected remarks. Biden apologized to Obama in private for having spoken out, while Obama acknowledged publicly it had been done from the heart. The incident showed that Biden still struggled at times with message discipline, as Time wrote, "Everyone knows that Biden's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness." Relations were also strained between the campaigns when Biden appeared to use his to bolster fundraising contacts for a possible run on his own in the 2016 presidential election, and the vice president ended up being excluded from Obama campaign strategy meetings. On November 6, 2012, the president and vice president were elected to second terms. The Obama-Biden ticket won 332 Electoral College votes to Romney-Ryan's 206 and had a 51 to 47% edge in the nationwide popular vote. In December 2012, Biden was named by Obama to head the Gun Violence Task Force, created to address the causes of gun violence in the United States in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting. Later that month, during the final days before the country fell off the fiscal cliff, Biden's relationship with McConnell once more proved important as the two negotiated a deal that led to the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012 being passed at the start of 2013. It made permanent much of the Bush tax cuts, but raised rates on upper income levels. By 2015, a series of swearings-in and other events where Biden placed his hands on women and girls and talked closely to them had attracted the attention of both the press and social media. In one case, a senator issued a statement afterwards saying about his daughter, "No, she doesn't think the vice president is creepy." On January 17, 2015, Secret Service agents heard shots were fired as a vehicle drove near Biden's Delaware residence at 8:28 p.m. outside the security perimeter, but the vice president and his wife Jill were not home. A vehicle was observed by an agent speeding away. During much of his second term, Biden was said to be preparing for a possible bid for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination. At age 74 on Inauguration Day in January 2017, he would have been the oldest president on inauguration in history, with his family, many friends and donors encouraging him in mid-2015 to enter the race, and with Hillary Clinton's favourability ratings in decline at that time, Biden was reported to again be seriously considering the prospect, and a draft Biden 2016 PAC was established. As of September 11, 2015, Biden was still uncertain whether or not to run. Biden cited the recent death of his son being a large drain on his emotional energy, and that nobody has a right to seek that office unless they're willing to give it 110% of who they are. On October the 21st, speaking from a podium in the Rose Garden with his wife and President Obama by his side, Biden announced his decision not to enter the race for the Democratic presidential nomination in the 2016 election. In January 2016, Biden affirmed that not running was the right decision, but admitted to regretting not running for president every day. As of the end of January 2016, neither Biden nor President Barack Obama had endorsed any candidate in the 2016 presidential election. Biden did miss his annual Thanksgiving tradition of going to Nantucket, opting instead to travel abroad and meet with several European leaders. He took time to meet with Martin O'Malley, having previously met with Bernie Sanders, both 2016 candidates. Neither of these meetings was considered an endorsement, as Biden had said that he would meet with any candidate who asked. In 2017, Biden was named the Benjamin Franklin Presidential Practice Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, where he intended to focus on foreign policy, diplomacy and national security, while leading the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. He also wanted to pursue his cancer moonshot agenda, calling the fight against cancer the only bipartisan thing left in America, in March 2017. During a tour of the US Senate with reporters before leaving office on December 5, 2016, Biden refused to rule out a bid for the presidency in the 2020 presidential election, after leaving office as vice president. If he were to run in 2020, Biden would be 77 years old on Election Day and 78 on Inauguration Day in 2021. He reasserted his ambivalence about running on an appearance of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert on December 7th. in which he stated never say never about running for president in 2020, while also acknowledging that he did not see a scenario in which he would run for office again. He seemingly announced on January the 13th, 2017, exactly 1 week prior to the expiration of his vice presidential term, that he would not run. He then appeared to backtrack 4 days later on January the 17th, stating, "I'll run if I can walk." A political action committee known as Time for Biden was formed in January 2018, seeking Biden's entry into the race. Between 2016 and 2019, Biden was mentioned by various media outlets as a potential candidate. He told a forum held in Bogotá, Colombia, on July the 17th, 2018, that he would decide whether or not to formally declare as a candidate by January 2019. On February the 4th, 2019, with no decision having been forthcoming from Biden, Edward Isaac DeVere of The Atlantic wrote that Biden was very close to saying yes, but that some close to him are worried he would have a last-minute change of heart, as he did in 2016. DeVere reported that Biden was concerned about the effect another presidential run could have on his family and reputation, as well as fundraising struggles and perceptions about his age and relative centralism compared to other declared and potential candidates. Conversely, his sense of duty offence at the Trump presidency, the lack of foreign policy experience amongst other Democratic hopefuls, and his desire to foster bridge-building progressivism in the party was said to be factors prompting him to run. In March 2019, he indicated he may run, and ultimately launched his campaign on April 25, 2019. In May 2019, Biden chose Philadelphia to be his 2020 U.S. presidential campaign headquarters. While at a fundraiser on June 18, 2019, Biden said that one of his greatest strengths was bringing people together, and pointed to his relationship with Senators James Eastland and Herman Talmadge, two segregationists, as examples. While imitating a Southern drawl, Biden remarked, "I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland. He never called me boy, he always called me son." New Jersey Senator Cory Booker was one of many Democrats to criticize Biden for the remarks, issuing a statement that said, "You don't joke about calling black men boys. Men like James O. Eastland used words like that, and the racist policies that accompanied them, to perpetrate white supremacy and strip black Americans of our very humanity." During the first Democratic presidential debate, Kamala Harris criticized Biden for his comments regarding his past work with segregationist senators and his past opposition to desegregation busing that allowed black children like her to attend integrated schools. Biden was widely criticized for his debate performance, and support for him dropped 10 points. President Trump defended Biden, saying Harris was given too much credit for her debate with Biden. There have been multiple photographs and videos of Biden engaged in what commentators considered to be inappropriate proximity to women and children, including kissing and/or touching. Biden has described himself as a tactile politician, and admitted that this behavior has caused trouble for him in the past. An image of Biden in close proximity to Stephanie Carter during her husband's swearing in as Secretary of Defense in 2015 resulted in a mocking epithet that was widely repeated. Carter defended Biden's depicted behavior in a 2019 interview. In March 2019, former Nevada Assemblywoman Lucy Flores alleged that Biden kissed her without her consent at a 2014 campaign rally in Las Vegas. In a New York magazine op-ed for The Cut, Flores wrote that Biden had walked up behind her, put his hands on her shoulders, smelled her hair, and kissed the back of her neck, adding that the way he had touched her was an intimate way reserved for close friends, family, or romantic partners, and I felt powerless to do anything about it. In an interview with HuffPost, Flores stated she believed Biden's behavior to be disqualifying for a 2020 presidential run. Biden's spokesman stated that Biden did not recall the behavior described. 2 days after Flores, Amy Lapos, a former congressional aide to Jim Himes, said Biden crossed a line of decency and respect when he touched her in a non-sexual but inappropriate way by holding her head to rub noses with her at a political fundraiser in Greenwich in 2009. The next day, 2 additional women came forward with allegations of inappropriate conduct. One woman said that Biden placed his hand on her thigh, and the other said he ran his hand from her shoulder down her back. By early April 2019, a total of 7 women had made allegations of inappropriate physical contact regarding Biden. At a conference on April the 5th, Biden apologized for not understanding how individuals would react to his actions, but stated that his intentions were honorable. He went on to say that he was not sorry for anything he had ever done, which led critics to accuse him of sending a mixed message. He also proclaimed, with each public embrace he gave during the event, that he had received permission for it. Some critics interpreted this as Biden jokingly deflecting criticism, while other observers considered his change in tone responsive to the criticisms received. A talented politician, Joe Biden is no doubt one of the most interesting candidates of the 2020 elections and continues to poll as the frontrunner in the Democratic bid for the presidency of the United States.